first time I saw Maya Torres Chilenia, I thought she was just another fragile human cadet. We all did. Then she unzipped her uniform collar and revealed the tattoo. The room fell silent. No one dared laugh again. That single gesture shattered every assumption we had about her species. What we learned next about human intimidation would haunt us forever. The first time I walked into that combat theory classroom, I thought I understood power. The Galactic Military Academy was a brutalist monument to visible strength, all polished durasteel and sharp angles. Every corridor hummed with the energy of species displaying their natural advantages like currency. Morgothians occupied the rear benches, their armored plates clacking together as they shifted. They polished their spiked carapaces between lectures, the sound like stones grinding together. Krillians sat near the front, flashing bladed teeth during discussions. Their smiles cut through arguments better than their actual words.
Even the Ilarians projected faint psychic auras that made the air around them shimmer with unspoken dominance. Intimidation was the Academy's primary language.
Cadets measured each other by reach, by armor density, by venom potency. You could chart the social hierarchy by how much space each species commanded. Morgothians never needed to ask for room, others simply moved. Krillians cleared circles around themselves with subtle tooth displays. The entire system operated on immediate physical assessment, a brutal efficiency that left no room for ambiguity. Military doctrine had codified these biases into official policy. Training manuals detailed optimal engagement distances based on average appendage length. Simulation parameters accounted for natural armor classifications. Even the seating arrangements reflected perceived threat levels. The system wasn't designed to accommodate anything that didn't fit established physical parameters. Then the human cadet entered. She moved through the doorway without the expected presence. No plates, no blades, no psychic distortion, just standard-issue boots on polished floor. 2 arms instead of 4, soft skin where there should have been scales. The dissonance was immediate. Conversation stuttered. A Krillian actually retracted his bladed teeth mid-sentence. She took a seat near the middle, not claiming space but occupying it. The Morgothians didn't shift to accommodate her. One actually flexed his shoulder plates in a warning display. She either didn't notice or didn't care. Her gaze swept the room with clinical detachment, assessing without challenging. I remember thinking she looked like a data analyst who'd wandered into a gladiator arena. That initial assessment felt complete. Another political admission. Another species trying to punch above its weight class. We had her measured and categorized before she'd even opened her mouth. The classroom's energy returned to normal within minutes. Laughter resumed. Posturing continued. We were wrong about everything. The absence of visible weapons wasn't weakness. It was a different kind of strategy entirely. Her ordinary appearance wasn't a limitation. It was the perfect camouflage for something far more dangerous than any natural weapon in that room. What we dismissed as fragility was actually precision. What we read as vulnerability was control. The real power wasn't in what she displayed. It was in what she chose to conceal. We called her the human problem behind her back, and we thought we were clever. Everyone at the Academy knew humans had only been admitted as a political concession after the Cath Wars. The Galactic Council wanted to show interspecies unity, so they forced the military command to accept one human cadet. We viewed it as charity, not merit. The consensus was clear. She didn't earn her place. My observational notes from that period show the patterns clearly. Maya Torres occupied space without claiming it. 2 arms where others had 4 or 6. Soft tissue coverage instead of protective plating. No venom sacs, no retractable claws, no natural projectile systems. Her biological profile read like a list of vulnerabilities. The Academy's internal memos classified humans as physiologically limited, Tier 3 combat potential. Groups that operate under established norms have precise methods for handling outliers. The Morgothians used physical posturing, deliberately flexing plates when she passed. Krillians employed vocal intimidation, making blade-sharpening clicks with their teeth. Even the usually reserved Ilarians would create minor psychic discomfort fields around her workstation. Laughter became the social enforcement tool. When she answered a tactical question correctly, the room would erupt in condescending chuckles. Not because her answer was wrong, but because her species had given it. The classroom dynamics followed predictable exclusion patterns. During simulation assignments, nobody chose her for their team. When groups formed for close combat drills, She always ended up as the last pick. The professor would have to assign her manually. I documented 7 instances where cadets accidentally blocked her access to training equipment. The message was consistent. You don't belong here. I shared these prejudices. My reports noted her unusual calm under social pressure, but concluded it was likely ignorance rather than fortitude. The prevailing theory was that humans simply lacked the neural sensitivity to recognize subtle social threats. We interpreted her composure as biological limitation, not psychological strength. Then I noticed something that didn't fit the pattern. During a particularly brutal mock interrogation exercise, a Krillian cadet got too aggressive. He used actual pressure points, not simulated ones. Most species would have reacted with pain or anger. Maya just went still. Her breathing regulated, her eyes focused with unnerving intensity. She didn't look like someone being dominated. She looked like someone collecting data. That's when the first doubt crept in. The laughter seemed to bounce off her without effect. The posturing left her unmoved. She moved through the academy's social violence like it was bad weather, something to be endured, not engaged. Her calm wasn't passive. It was observant. The incident that changed everything began like all the others. Professor Draxus called on her during combat theory. The room prepared its usual response. Smirks spread. A Morgathian shifted forward, ready to enjoy the spectacle. Then her hand went to her collar. The energy shifted. Then she moved her hand to her collar and the room's energy shifted. Professor Draxus had just challenged her to explain human advantages in direct combat. His mandibles clicked with academic condescension. The question was designed to highlight biological limitations, not reveal strengths. He expected her to stumble through some theoretical justification. Instead, her fingers found the zipper tab at her throat. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense with anticipation and poorly concealed smirks. Krillian cadets leaned forward, bladed teeth barely concealed. Morgothians rustled their plates in amusement. They were preparing to enjoy another display of human inadequacy. The air felt heavy with the weight of their collective expectation. The zipper made a precise sound, a metallic whisper that cut through the room's atmosphere. It wasn't the rough scrape of armor adjustment or the wet click of biological systems. This was manufactured precision. Then the light caught the revealed ink. Classroom illumination glinted off dark pigment embedded in skin. Human body modification traditions carry specific military significance. Certain markings indicate completed training regimens. Others symbolize membership in specialized units. The placement on the throat is particularly significant. It signals acceptance of vulnerability transformed into strength. This wasn't decorative. It was a credential. The tattoo showed anatomical precision. A human skull rendered with clinical accuracy, not cartoon exaggeration. Every suture line, every bone structure correct. Thorns wrapped around the jawline, biting into bone. They weren't decorative vines, they were restraints that had clearly failed. The imagery communicated something essential about struggle and containment. Below the skull, stark block lettering spelled a phrase in pre-unification English. The characters were clean and unadorned. No decorative serifs, no artistic flair. The message was meant to be read, not admired. The language choice was deliberate. It forced translation, created a moment of computational delay that extended the reveal's impact. Simultaneously, a metal piercing caught the light. A simple steel barbell through the cartilage ridge of her ear. The placement was precise, not decorative, but structural. It complemented the throat marking, creating a visual symmetry between displayed pain tolerance and concealed message. The combination was clearly intentional. You could feel the collective reassessment happening in real time. Morgothian plates stilled. Krillian teeth retracted fully. Alarian psychic fields dissipated. The classroom's condescending energy evaporated like coolant hitting vacuum. Every cadet recognized what they were seeing, even if they didn't understand the specific symbolism. This wasn't a decorative marking. It was a calibrated threat display. The precision of the artwork indicated discipline. The placement signaled defiance of vulnerability. The combination of permanent ink and metal through cartilage demonstrated exceptional pain tolerance. The entire composition communicated capabilities far beyond physical strength. Her presence in the room transformed completely. The woman we'd dismissed as fragile now radiated. No one dared laugh again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with reassessment. Every cadet in that room was recalculating. You could see the cognitive shifts happening in real time. Postures changed. Expressions tightened. The collective mockery evaporated like moisture in vacuum. Vex 12's mandibles stiffened into a defensive position. His usual confident click reduced to a faint vibration. The Krillian 3 seats back fully retracted his bladed teeth, something I'd only seen during high-alert drills. A Morgothian actually shifted his armored plates to create slightly more space between himself and the human. These weren't conscious decisions. They were instinctive threat responses. Predator species recognize display behaviors instinctively. We're wired to read visual cues that signal danger beyond physical size or armament. The tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a complex communication system. The skull placement indicated acceptance of mortality. The thorns suggested experience with restraint and struggle. The precision of the artwork demonstrated discipline and control. Combined with the cartilage piercing, it communicated exceptional pain tolerance. Every previous interaction with Maya required reinterpretation. Her calm during intimidation attempts wasn't ignorance, it was conditioning. Her lack of response to posturing wasn't weakness, it was perspective. The times she'd remained silent during challenges weren't submission, they were conservation of energy. We'd been reading her all wrong. The evidence had been there, but we lacked the cultural context to understand it. The symbols communicated specific capabilities that bypassed physical comparison. Acceptance of pain indicated resilience beyond biological limits. Commitment to ideals signaled psychological fortitude that didn't require external validation. The combination suggested a mindset that valued endurance over immediate dominance. This was a completely different combat philosophy. The room's energy transformed from mockery to apprehension within seconds. Smirks vanished. Leaning forward postures became careful upright positions. Even Professor Draxus paused his mandible movements. The atmospheric shift was palpable. This wasn't fear exactly. It was the sudden awareness of miscalculation. We'd assessed the human using our own cultural metrics and found her lacking. Now we understood the metrics were wrong. Anticipation built toward her verbal explanation. The silence stretched, each second adding weight to what would come next. Every cadet waited for her to define what we were witnessing. The professor's original challenge about human combat advantages hung in the air, suddenly relevant in ways he hadn't intended. Her response would need to match the visual display's impact. The explanation would either confirm our reassessment or collapse it. We weren't just waiting for words. We were waiting for context that would either validate or dismiss our sudden apprehension. The classroom felt like it was holding its breath. Then she spoke. Her voice didn't rise to meet the tension. It remained at conversational level, which made the content land with greater force. The contrast between her calm delivery and the room's heightened alertness created cognitive dissonance. She wasn't performing for us. She was simply answering the question. Permission to demonstrate nonverbal intimidation. The request was precise, professional, and completely unexpected. It bypassed theoretical discussion entirely. She wasn't going to explain human advantages. She was going to show us. Permission to demonstrate nonverbal intimidation. Her voice didn't rise above conversational volume. The request hung in the air, precise and unexpected. Professor Draxus froze mid-mandible movement. Academy protocol required theoretical explanation first. Practical demonstration only after approval. She'd reversed the sequence entirely. The professor's hesitation was visible. His antennae twitched in conflicting directions. Protocol demanded he require verbal explanation first, but the tactical value of what she proposed clearly registered. Controlled demonstrations often prove more effective than uncontrolled violence for teaching intimidation principles. A well-executed display can communicate threat parameters without actual damage, creating lasting psychological impact. The military value was evident even if the method was unorthodox. Cadets reacted instinctively before the professor decided. Several leaned back in their stations. A Krillian actually angled his bladed teeth away from her. Morgothian plates shifted into slightly more defensive configurations. The physical positioning wasn't conscious. It was autonomic response to perceived threat escalation. They weren't afraid yet, but they were preparing to be. The exact wording of her request carried significance. Nonverbal intimidation specified a category beyond physical combat. Demonstrate indicated she would show rather than tell. The phrasing suggested this was a standardized technique, not improvisation. She was requesting to perform a trained procedure. not create a spontaneous display. This wasn't personal expression, it was doctrine. Draxus's mandibles finally stilled. He gave a single sharp nod. Permission granted. The breach of protocol was significant. Professors didn't allow unvetted demonstrations, especially from cadets representing politically sensitive species. But the academic value apparently outweighed the procedural risk. He recognized this as legitimate combat instruction, however unconventional. The room's atmosphere tightened further. Now that demonstration was authorized, anticipation shifted to apprehension. What exactly would she demonstrate? How would nonverbal intimidation work in practice? The tattoo's message had already communicated significant information, but active demonstration would make it operational. Theory was about to become practice. Controlled demonstrations serve multiple tactical purposes. They establish capability without expending resources. They communicate boundaries and consequences. They create psychological leverage that can deter future conflicts. A successful demonstration can prevent actual violence by making the costs clear in advance. This approach values efficiency over aggression, prevention over reaction. Maya didn't change her stance or expression. She remained standing exactly as before, hands at her sides. The demonstration apparently didn't require physical preparation or theatrical positioning. It would happen from her current state of readiness, which made the impending action feel more authentic, less performative. Draxus's approval signaled important institutional recognition. By accepting her method as valid instruction, he implicitly validated human combat philosophy as worthy of academy attention. The nod wasn't just permission, it was academic endorsement of an entirely different approach to intimidation. The classroom was about to receive instruction from an unexpected source. The transition to actual demonstration felt instantaneous. There was no countdown, no preparatory signal. One moment she had permission, the next moment the demonstration was underway. The lack of buildup made it more effective. It suggested she could deploy this capability immediately without warning or preparation. Readiness itself became part of the message. Then she began the demonstration not with movement but with complete stillness. Her breathing pattern changed, becoming barely visible. Her gaze swept the room with different quality, assessing rather than observing. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't preparing to perform. She was preparing to communicate threat through presence alone. The tattoo indicates that I would rather die than compromise my honor. Maya's voice remained level, as if discussing atmospheric readings. She pointed to the skull design without touching it. This placement signals that my values reside here. Her finger tapped her throat. The most vulnerable point. The message is clear, take this and you take everything. The classroom's understanding shifted in stages. First confusion, then dawning comprehension. This wasn't about physical advantage. It was about psychological positioning. Her combat philosophy operated on completely different axioms. She gestured to the cartilage piercing. This indicates comfort with pain, not endurance, familiarity. The distinction was important. Endurance suggests temporary tolerance. Familiarity implies ongoing relationship. She wasn't resisting discomfort. She was conversant with it. The thorns represent restraint systems that failed. Her explanation continued, clinical and precise. They symbolize overcoming imposed limitations, not breaking free, making the restraints irrelevant through growth. Military honor systems across cultures share common threads. They create internal codes that supersede external threats. Morgothians value clutch loyalty above individual survival. Krillians prioritize combat elegance over simple victory. But human honors seemed different. It wasn't about group loyalty or aesthetic principles. It was about personal integrity as tactical advantage. Her smile wasn't about amusement. Facial tension patterns indicate comfort with violence. She demonstrated without changing expression. Relaxed musculature during threat assessment signals familiarity with conflict resolution through force. It communicates that violence isn't an emergency measure. It's a tool among many. This reframed intimidation completely. Physical displays like extended claws or enhanced plating communicate capacity for harm. Her approach communicated acceptance of harm, both giving and receiving. The difference was fundamental. One says, I can hurt you. The other says, you cannot hurt me in ways that matter. The psychological impact outweighs physical threat. Knowing an opponent values honor above survival changes engagement calculations. Standard intimidation relies on fear of pain or death. Her method made those standard leverages irrelevant. How do you threaten someone who considers compromise worse than termination? Anticipation built toward practical application. How would this philosophy translate to actual combat? Would she retreat from physical confrontation? Would she fight differently? The theoretical framework was compelling, but the Academy valued practical results above all. The resolution crystallized slowly. Human intimidation operates on a spectrum beyond physical dimension. It uses psychological leverage, value systems, and communicated tolerance thresholds. The actual combat capability becomes almost secondary to the psychological positioning. Her final statement landed with quiet force. You cannot intimidate someone who has already accepted the worst possible outcome. The classroom absorbed this. Standard intimidation relies on threatening undesirable consequences. But if your opponent has already embraced those consequences as acceptable costs, the entire power dynamic shifts. The understanding settled throughout the room. We weren't looking at a physically limited species. We were looking at a psychologically advanced one. Their combat development had taken a different evolutionary path. They hadn't enhanced their bodies. They had refined their minds. Practical application would become clear soon enough. The orbital assault simulation was scheduled for the next rotation. We would see how this philosophy performed under actual combat conditions. The transition from theory to practice would test every assumption she'd just established. Then came the orbital assault simulation, and she vanished from our sensors. The exercise followed standard Academy parameters. Capture 3 strategic points against defended opposition. Every cadet knew the drill. Establish beachhead, secure objectives, eliminate resistance. The simulation chamber recreated a standard orbital station layout with familiar choke points and defense positions. Maya's team received the attack brief alongside everyone else. Their squad moved toward the primary entry point as expected. Then her signal dropped from the tactical map. No distress call, no system malfunction alert, just complete disappearance from all monitoring systems. The instructors initially assumed sensor error. They ran diagnostics while the exercise continued. She bypassed all 3 primary objectives entirely. Instead of advancing toward the central command node, she moved perpendicular to the assault axis. Rather than engaging defense positions, she navigated around them. The simulation was designed for frontal assault. She treated it like an infiltration mission. Asymmetric warfare tactics leverage unconventional methods against superior forces. They avoid direct confrontation, targeting instead command systems and logistical networks. The approach values indirect influence over direct control. Maya's movements followed this pattern precisely. She wasn't fighting the simulation. She was subverting it. Her path took her through maintenance shafts and environmental control conduits. These weren't on standard tactical maps. The Academy focused on main corridors and combat zones. She moved through spaces the exercise designers considered irrelevant. Her progress was invisible because nobody thought to monitor those pathways. The anticipation built with each minute she remained off-grid. What was she accomplishing while invisible? The red team continued defending expected approaches. Blue team pressed forward along standard assault routes. The simulation unfolded as designed except for one missing cadet. Then the pattern emerged. Systems began reporting anomalous readings. Environmental controls fluctuated slightly. Communications experienced minor interference. Maintenance drones reported unexpected obstructions. Individually, these seemed like glitches. Together, they formed a pattern. The realization arrived in stages. She wasn't attempting to capture objectives. She was mapping the station's internal infrastructure, not the tactical layout, the actual physical systems. Power conduits, data networks, life support routing, information the Academy considered secondary to combat operations. She accomplished in minutes what normally required specialized scanning teams. Her movements through maintenance areas provided physical access to system junctions. Each junction contained identification markers and routing diagrams. She was building a complete structural map through direct observation. The strategic purpose became clear. Knowing a station's infrastructure provides tactical advantages beyond simple capture. You can predict reinforcement routes, identify structural vulnerabilities, anticipate defense positioning. This knowledge turns physical space into a tactical instrument. Her approach reframed the entire exercise. While other cadets fought over control points, she gained control of the battlefield itself. The objectives became irrelevant because she operated at a different level of engagement. The simulation wasn't about capturing territory. It was about understanding it. The instructors stopped checking their sensors. They began watching the anomaly reports instead. Each system fluctuation marked her progress. The pattern showed deliberate movement, not random exploration. She was conducting a systematic survey while the battle raged elsewhere. Then the communications network experienced a coordinated disruption. Red Team's command channel flickered. For 3 seconds, their tactical feed showed Blue Team positions from unusual angles. The glimpse revealed viewing points from maintenance cameras and environmental sensors. She wasn't just mapping the station, she was accessing its observation systems. The transition to active utilization was seamless. The mapping phase completed, she began leveraging the acquired knowledge. The infrastructure became a tool rather than an environment. She didn't attack Red Team. She became their command structure. Her infiltration of their communication networks happened through maintenance access panels. Each junction box contained data relays she could physically patch into. The Academy's security protocols focused on wireless protection. They never considered someone would manually hardwire into the system. Information warfare prioritizes control of communication channels over physical dominance. Command infiltration techniques exploit the gap between assumed security and actual vulnerability. Maya operated in that gap. She didn't crack encryption. She bypassed it entirely through physical access. Her false orders followed established patterns. She instructed Squad 7 to reinforce the already secure Western Corridor. The order matched standard defensive doctrine. The squad moved immediately, leaving their position undefended. Blue Team advanced through the gap without resistance. Another command redirected auxiliary units to inspect non-existent sensor ghosts in the ventilation system. The team spent valuable minutes searching empty ducts. Their absence created openings throughout the defense network. Each movement seemed logical individually. Collectively, they dismantled cohesion. She issued a stand-down order to the rapid response team. The command used proper authentication codes she'd observed during earlier transmissions. The team remained in reserve while critical positions fell. They assumed the situation was under control. Specific effects cascaded through the exercise. Defense positions became isolated. Reinforcement routes went unmanned. Response time slowed dramatically. Red Team's coordination dissolved into confusion. They were following orders, just not from their actual command. This approach dismantles unit cohesion without confrontation. Soldiers who believe they're receiving legitimate orders will follow them. The breakdown occurs in the command structure, not the ranks. The system collapses from the top down, not the bottom up. Anticipation built toward the instructor's assessment. They watched the simulation with increasing attention. The tactical displays showed Blue Team advancing against crumbling resistance. The cause remained invisible until the post-exercise analysis. The footage review revealed everything. Camera angles from maintenance shafts showed her physical intrusions. Communication logs documented the false orders. The timeline showed the precise moment Red Team's defense became fictional. An instructor described the performance as brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and completely contrary to everything we had been taught. The assessment wasn't enthusiastic. It was clinical. They recognized tactical innovation even as it violated established doctrine. The approach represented a fundamental shift in combat philosophy. Instead of overcoming defenses, she made them irrelevant. Rather than defeating opponents, she made them cooperate in their own defeat. The efficiency was terrifying. The transition to debriefing was inevitable. Such deviation from standard protocols required examination. The instructors needed to understand whether this was valid tactics or simply rule-breaking. The Academy existed to test boundaries, but within established parameters. Challenges to her methods began immediately. Cadets from traditional combat backgrounds questioned the approach. They argued it wasn't proper warfare. It lacked honor. It avoided direct engagement. The tension between innovation and tradition became the central debate. Vex 12's objection was particularly vocal. His species valued direct confrontation above all. He called the approach trickery rather than tactics. His challenge would soon transform from verbal criticism to physical test. The debate was about to move from theoretical discussion to practical demonstration. Vex 12 called it trickery. He demanded proof of actual combat skill. His species favored direct physical confrontation above all other methods. They viewed deception as weakness, not strategy. His challenge echoed through the training hall with the resonance of established tradition, confronting uncomfortable innovation. Vex represented physical superiority embodied. His species possessed redundant organ systems, accelerated healing, and density-enhanced musculature. He stood half a meter taller than Maya, with limb reach exceeding hers by a significant margin. His natural armor could deflect low-energy projectiles. The biological advantages seemed overwhelming when measured on standard comparative scales. The expectation was clear. Direct combat would expose human physical limitations. The simulation's success could be dismissed as clever exploitation of system vulnerabilities. Real fighting required strength, speed, and durability, qualities his species possessed in abundance. The Academy's combat metrics supported his confidence. Every physiological test favored his biology. They established non-lethal dual parameters. Energy-dampening fields would prevent fatal injuries. Neural feedback systems would register disabling hits. The rules allowed full combat movement without permanent damage. Weapon selection followed standard protocol. Each combatant could choose from approved armories. Technological species often underestimate biological capabilities. They assume advanced technology indicates superior evolution. Vex's people had developed energy weapons while humans still used projectile systems. This created unconscious bias toward technological advancement as measure of combat effectiveness. The assumption that biological limitations couldn't be overcome through training proved incorrect. Maya's weapon choices seemed conventional, but contained subtle implications. She selected a short blade instead of longer reach weapons. The choice suggested close quarters preference despite reach disadvantage. Her shield was smaller than standard issue, favoring mobility over protection. The ranged option was a low-energy projectile weapon, effective only against unarmored areas. The combination indicated precision over power. Vex chose differently. He selected a force pike with extended reach. His shield covered most of his body. His ranged weapon was medium energy, capable of penetrating light armor. The selections maximized his physical advantages while compensating for minimal agility. The loadouts perfectly represented their combat philosophies. Overwhelming force versus precise application. Anticipation built toward the actual confrontation. Cadets formed observation rings around the training area. Instructors monitored physiological readings. The atmosphere felt charged with unresolved debate. This wasn't just personal challenge, it was ideological clash made physical. The outcome would validate or discredit an entire approach to combat. Maya's agreement to the duel was immediate. She accepted the challenge on his terms without negotiation. The response surprised observers. Most would have argued for simulation continuations or modified conditions. Her acceptance suggested either confidence or recklessness. The calm demeanor indicated the former. The transition to combat was formal. Both combatants assumed starting positions. The training system initialized protective fields. Countdown indicators flashed above the arena. Tension heightened with each decreasing number. The confrontation would begin in moments. Then the start signal sounded. The encounter unfolded with shocking speed. The transition from readiness to resolution happened faster than cognitive processing allowed. Observation became recollection almost immediately. The duel was over before most observers registered it had properly begun. The duel lasted 4 seconds. I timed it. Both combatants assumed standard ready positions. Vex stood with force pike extended, his weight distributed for explosive forward movement. Maya held her short blade in a relaxed grip, shield positioned for minimal protection. The starting signal flashed overhead. The training field's energy dampeners hummed to life. Vex initiated aggression immediately. His species favored overwhelming first strikes. He lunged forward, pike aimed at her center mass. The movement utilized his superior reach and momentum. He expected to force a defensive reaction, a block or dodge that would create openings for follow-up attacks. His approach was textbook for his physiology. Maya's response was instantaneous. She didn't retreat or block. She moved inside his weapon's effective range before the thrust fully developed. Her blade deflected the pike shaft rather than the tip, using minimal force to redirect the attack. The maneuver placed her adjacent to his extended arm. Human reaction times exceed most species estimates. Their neural processing operates on shortened pathways for threat response. But this wasn't simple reaction. She began moving before his lunge completed. Her initial step started during his weight shift, not after movement initiation. She read his body language through micro-expressions. The tension in his shoulder muscles indicated attack direction. The distribution of his weight signaled commitment to forward momentum. The angle of his pike revealed intended target area. She processed these cues in the fraction of a second before his movement became unstoppable. Her disarming technique utilized his own force. A precise strike to his wrist joint compromised his grip. The force pike clattered to the floor. His forward momentum now worked against him, carrying him toward her position rather than away. The maneuvering phase was seamless. She maintained contact throughout the motion, controlling his balance through proximity. Her footwork positioned her behind his center of gravity. He was already off balance from the lunge. She enhanced the instability with minimal applied force. The pinning action was clinical. She used his falling momentum to take him to the floor. Her knee pressed against his thoracic cavity. Not enough to injure, but sufficient to prevent movement. The short blade rested against his throat, precisely angled to avoid triggering the protective fields while communicating lethal potential. Vex's assessment came from the floor. His breathing was labored more from shock than impact. The rapid transition from attacker to immobilized happened faster than cognitive processing. He was still mentally executing his attack pattern when the blade touched his neck. The neutralization was complete. Physical advantage became irrelevant. Strength didn't matter when leverage and position were controlled. Reach meant nothing when the distance was eliminated. Armor provided no protection against precision targeting of weak points. The resolution demonstrated a different understanding of speed. It wasn't about movement velocity alone. It was about processing speed, decision speed, and action speed operating simultaneously. The 4 seconds included observation, analysis, and execution as a single continuous process. The redefinition of human speed began with that demonstration. We had measured their physical capabilities against our own metrics. We assessed muscle contraction rates and nerve conduction velocities. We failed to account for integrated system performance. Their speed wasn't a physical attribute, it was a tactical one. Vex remained on the floor several seconds after the blade withdrew. His expression showed recalculation rather than defeat. The lesson wasn't about losing. It was about learning that combat could operate on different temporal scales. Some conflicts end before opponents realize they've begun. Speed. Humans are apparently much faster than their species profile indicates. Vex 12's assessment came from the training floor, his voice tight with recalibration rather than pain. The blade at his throat wasn't applying pressure. It was simply present, a statement of capability rather than threat. His words carried the weight of someone rewriting fundamental assumptions in real time. The realization settled through the observation gallery. Human speed wasn't about movement velocity alone. We'd measured limb acceleration and neural response times. We'd cataloged sprint durations and reaction thresholds. Our profiles were technically accurate yet completely missed the essence. Their speed operated on a different axis entirely. Maya anticipated his actions rather than simply reacting to them. Her initial movement began during Vex's weight shift, not after his lunge initiated. She read micro-tensions in his shoulder configuration. She interpreted his center of gravity distribution. His attack pattern became predictable before his muscles completed firing sequences. Predictive pattern recognition transforms combat effectiveness. Advanced militaries train soldiers to identify attack precursors rather than respond to attacks themselves. The human nervous system apparently developed this capability organically through evolutionary pressures. Their survival depended on anticipating predator movements rather than outpacing them. This cognitive capability collapses the advantage of physically superior opponents. Heavy armor becomes irrelevant when strikes target joint weaknesses. Greater strength matters little when leverage neutralizes force. Extended reach provides no benefit when combat occurs inside effective range. The entire physical dominance hierarchy crumbles when opponents operate on different decision timelines. The broader implications extended beyond single combat. Fleet engagements could be decided before weapons fired. Planetary defenses might be bypassed through anticipating patrol patterns. Diplomatic negotiations could be influenced by predicting concession points. Human speed wasn't just a combat advantage. It was a strategic multiplier. The resolution crystallized gradually. Human speed is a cognitive weapon, not merely physical. Their advantage lies in processing and prediction, not simple motion. They compete in the space between thought and action, compressing decision cycles until opposition becomes reaction rather than interaction. Vex rose from the floor with different posture. His previously aggressive stance became observational. He wasn't defeated. He was educated. The lesson transcended personal victory or loss. It revealed a completely different paradigm of conflict. The training hall's atmosphere shifted from spectacle to study. Cadets began discussing temporal compression in combat decision cycles. Instructors pulled up neural response comparison charts. The fascination wasn't with Maya's victory, but with her methodology. How she won mattered more than that she won. The transition to formal debriefing became inevitable. Such deviation from expected performance required examination. The academy existed to analyze and incorporate new tactics. Maya's approach represented either brilliant innovation or dangerous exception. The distinction would determine whether it became doctrine or remained anomaly. Her calm during the walk to debriefing contrasted with the room's energized discussion. She hadn't performed exceptionally in her view. She'd simply demonstrated standard human combat methodology. The revelation that this wasn't standard for other species seemed to interest her more than the victory itself. The debriefing room awaited with recording systems active. The instructors prepared to dissect every second of the engagement. They intended to understand not just what happened, but how it reflected broader capabilities. The 4-second duel was about to become hours of analysis. Maya's voice in the debriefing room would be calm and precise. Her explanation would focus on information control and psychological positioning, rather than physical techniques. The transition from demonstration to doctrine would happen through clinical explanation, rather than dramatic revelation. Today's simulation was not about violence. Her voice in the debriefing room was calm and precise. The statement landed with clinical detachment. Cadets leaned forward, expecting discussion of combat techniques. They anticipated breakdowns of movement patterns or weapon choices. Instead, she directed attention to the tactical display now showing her path through the station. Her explanation focused on information control. She detailed how she mapped the environmental systems not for navigation, but for understanding operational patterns. Life support diagnostics revealed crew concentration areas. Power flow indicator showed active defense systems. Maintenance schedules indicated recent structural modifications. Each data point became a tactical advantage. Resource allocation received equal emphasis. She explained prioritizing access to communication relays over weapon depots. Control of information channels outweighed control of armaments. Restricting opponent mobility through system manipulation proved more effective than direct engagement. The approach valued influence over destruction. Psychological manipulation formed the core strategy. Feeding false orders created confusion without casualties. Redirecting patrols generated operational friction. Isolating command elements disrupted coordination. Each action aimed at degrading combat effectiveness through cognitive means rather than physical force. Modern warfare increasingly prioritizes information dominance. Advanced militaries recognize that controlling the narrative often determines outcomes more decisively than controlling territory. The human approach reflected this evolution. Their tactics treated data as primary ammunition and perception as key terrain. This reframes violence as merely one tool among many. Physical confrontation becomes optional rather than inevitable. Combat effectiveness is measured by objective achievement, not opponent elimination. The most efficient solution rarely involves maximum application of force. The radical efficiency of this approach became apparent through cost-benefit analysis. Her simulation performance required minimal energy expenditure, no ammunition consumed, no equipment damaged, no injuries sustained. The outcome was achieved through intelligence and access rather than destructive capability. The resolution crystallized in her final assessment. Violence is usually not the most efficient tool in the tactical toolbox. The statement challenged fundamental academy doctrine. Centuries of military tradition emphasized overcoming opponents through superior force. She suggested overcoming challenges through superior understanding. The debriefing room absorbed this paradigm shift. Instructors exchanged thoughtful glances. Cadets reconsidered their approach to previous exercises. The simulation wasn't failed or won. It was solved through different methodology. Questions began forming about her background. This level of strategic thinking suggested specialized training beyond standard military education. Her approach displayed familiarity with asymmetric warfare principles and psychological operations. The techniques seemed too refined for conventional training. The transition to inquiries about her origins felt natural. How does a species develop such methodology? What environmental pressures shape this combat philosophy? The answers would reveal whether this was cultural evolution or institutional training. Her response would come with the same measured precision. The revelation of her actual background would explain much while raising deeper questions. The United Earth Special Operations Academy represented a different kind of military education entirely. Their focus on unconventional warfare explained the deviation from standard tactical approaches. The understanding that she wasn't a regular cadet began dawning. Exchange programs often bring different perspectives, but this was more fundamental. She wasn't here to learn standard doctrine. She was here to demonstrate alternatives to it. The smooth transition to her formal background disclosure felt inevitable. The debriefing had revealed the what and how. Now the why required explanation. Her presence at the academy served purposes beyond simple interspecies exchange. That's when we learned she graduated from the United Earth Special Operations Academy. The revelation came during formal credentials verification. Instructor Draxus requested background clarification after the simulation performance. Her file contained classification markers none of us recognized initially. She wasn't a standard cadet. Special operations training focuses on unconventional warfare methodologies. Their curriculum emphasizes asymmetric engagement and psychological operations over conventional tactics. The difference is fundamental. They're taught to undermine systems rather than overwhelm them. Her specialties explained everything. Asymmetric warfare training teaches how smaller forces can defeat larger opponents through clever strategy. Psychological operations focus on influencing enemy behavior without direct engagement. Combined, they create soldiers who win conflicts before traditional combat begins. This background explained her completely different approach. Standard military training teaches how to fight within established parameters. Special operations training teaches how to change the parameters themselves. She wasn't following different rules. She was playing a different game entirely. The understanding recalibrated our assessment. We'd been evaluating her against standard combat metrics. Her training operated on completely different evaluation criteria. Success wasn't measured by enemies defeated but by objectives achieved with minimal expenditure. Special operations prioritize efficiency above all else. They measure success by resource conservation and objective completion. Casualty counts and territorial gains become secondary considerations. The philosophy values sustainable victory over spectacular conquest. This explained her simulation performance. She hadn't been showing off. She'd been demonstrating standard operational procedures for her training background. What we viewed as exceptional was actually doctrinal for her organization. The anticipation built toward understanding her actual purpose. Exchange programs typically involve standard military personnel. Sending a special operations graduate suggested specific intelligence objectives. Her presence wasn't about cultural exchange. It was about strategic assessment. Her participation in the exchange program specifically aimed to study non-human doctrine. The admission documents revealed this after credential verification. She wasn't here to learn general military tactics. She was here to analyze alien combat methodologies and psychological patterns. The shocking purpose behind her presence became clear. She was documenting everything. Our training exercises, our response patterns, our psychological triggers. Each simulation provided data on how different species approach combat. Every interaction revealed cultural biases and decision-making processes. The Galactic Academy represented an unprecedented intelligence opportunity. Dozens of species training together, revealing their tactical philosophies and operational limitations. For a special operations analyst, this was a target-rich environment beyond comparison. Her calm demeanor during interactions wasn't personal detachment. It was professional observation. The laughter and posturing we directed at her provided valuable data on social dynamics and intimidation methods. Our attempts to exclude her revealed our group cohesion mechanisms. The transition to understanding her mission felt inevitable. We weren't hosting an exchange student. We were being studied by a professional analyst from a military tradition that valued information above all else. Every lesson, every exercise, every casual conversation became potential intelligence gathering. The realization that she was learning more about us than we were about her settled heavily. Our open training environment became her research laboratory. Our doctrinal transparency became her strategic advantage. The exchange program's purpose had been completely subverted through specialized training and clear objectives. Her presence represented a fundamental miscalculation in interspecies military exchange protocols. We assumed all species approached these programs with similar intentions and methodologies. The human specialization in asymmetric warfare created an imbalance we never anticipated. She wasn't here to learn about us. She was here to learn about you. The realization settled like cold oxygen in my ventilation system. Every tactical discussion, every shared doctrine, every psychological insight was being systematically cataloged. Her calm observation during classes wasn't passive attendance. It was active intelligence gathering. Intelligence operations frequently occur under educational exchange programs. The pattern repeats across galactic history. A technologically developing species gains access to advanced institutions under cultural exchange pretexts. They document everything while appearing to learn. The host species assumes they're teaching. They're actually being studied. Maya was mapping psychological patterns across dozens of species. How Morgothians respond to perceived disrespect. What triggers Krillian aggression cycles. When Ilarians default to psychic dominance. Each interaction provided data points for future engagement protocols. Our classroom became her behavioral laboratory. The information would shape interstellar interactions for generations. Human diplomats would know which species respond to logical arguments versus emotional appeals. Their military strategists would understand tactical blind spots and predictable responses. Their negotiators would anticipate concession points before discussions began. She studied physiological weaknesses with clinical precision. Which joint structures were weakest under pressure? What respiratory patterns indicated stress? How visual systems processed threat information? The data wasn't for academic curiosity. It was for operational deployment. The long-term strategy became clear. Humanity wasn't seeking military dominance through conventional means. They were building a comprehensive database of galactic species capabilities and limitations. This knowledge would provide asymmetric advantages in all future interactions. Educational exchanges traditionally involve mutual learning. This was unilateral intelligence gathering masked as cultural sharing. We provided our tactical manuals, our psychological profiles, our combat methodologies. She provided polite questions and attentive silence. The mission aimed to shape galactic civilization in humanity's image through understanding, not through conquest or conversion, through precise application of psychological and cultural leverage. They would become the architects of interstellar relations by knowing everyone better than they knew themselves. The resolution arrived during a casual conversation in the observation deck. I asked about human expansion plans. Her response was measured. She spoke about structured cooperation and mutual benefit frameworks. The language sounded diplomatic but carried operational precision. Every word felt carefully chosen. Every concept seemed field-tested. The conversation wasn't spontaneous discussion. It was calibrated messaging. She was assessing my reactions to specific terminology and concepts. The smooth transition to broader ambitions happened naturally. She shifted from educational exchange to interstellar development. The scale of planning extended centuries into the future. The time frame wasn't generational. It was civilizational. Humanity's approach to galactic integration became apparent. They weren't rushing to claim territory or resources. They were patiently building the psychological and cultural foundations for influence. The Academy Exchange was one small component in a much larger strategy. The full scope of human ambition revealed itself gradually. They sought to become the gravitational center of interstellar politics without appearing to dominate. Their method relied on understanding rather than overpowering. Knowledge wasn't just power. It was the foundation of lasting influence. The conversation continued to broader philosophical questions. She asked about my species' historical development patterns. The questions seemed academic but served operational purposes. Each answer provided another data point for human analysts. I realized we were still being studied even during this revelation. The meta-conversation about human strategy was itself generating intelligence. The recursion was elegant and slightly terrifying. The observation never stopped. The data collection continued through every interaction. The transition to explicit discussion of human methods felt inevitable. The conversation had been building toward this point. My questions became more direct. Her answers remained carefully framed. The dance between revelation and concealment continued. Then she smiled, a small, precise movement. Conquer? No, that would be terribly inefficient. The statement landed with finality. The conversation was about to shift from abstract strategy to concrete methodology. The full scope of human ambition was becoming operational rather than theoretical. Conquer? No, that would be terribly inefficient. Maya's voice carried no particular emphasis. We stood in the observation deck watching ships navigate the orbital lanes. The conversation had turned to human expansion patterns. I'd expected territorial ambition. She described something entirely different. The expectation of conquest stemmed from galactic history. Most spacefaring species expanded through physical control. They claimed systems, established colonies, enforced borders. The model was familiar. Territory meant resources. Resources meant power. The equation seemed universal. Her explanation revealed a different calculus. Controlling territory requires constant investment. Garrison forces.
Supply lines.
Administrative oversight. Each new world adds logistical burden. The costs compound over time. Rebellion risks increase with distance from core systems. The model creates diminishing returns. Influence-based power structures often outperform direct control. They leverage existing systems rather than replacing them. Cooperative arrangements require less investment than occupation. Voluntary compliance costs less than enforced obedience. The efficiency difference becomes significant at interstellar scales. She described the centuries-long perspective. Human strategy operates on civilizational timeframes. Quick conquest creates temporary gains. Sustainable influence creates permanent advantage. They prefer building networks that last generations rather than empires that collapse under their own weight. The approach values psychological integration over physical domination. Instead of forcing compliance through threat, they create systems where cooperation becomes the rational choice. The mechanism is subtler but more durable. Resistance becomes irrational when the benefits of participation are clear. Research on power structures supports this approach. Systems based on mutual benefit outlast those based on coercion. Voluntary networks maintain themselves. Enforced systems require constant energy input to overcome natural entropy. The mathematics of control versus influence favor the latter for long-term stability. The revelation arrived gradually. Humans prefer structured cooperation underwritten by credible force. The military capability exists not for conquest but for insurance. It ensures agreements are honored. It protects the system itself, but it remains in the background unless needed. This explained their diplomatic approach. They weren't seeking treaties for immediate gain. They were building frameworks for future interaction. Each agreement established patterns that would shape relations for centuries. The strategy was architectural rather than transactional. The transition to practical implementation became clear. Their diplomatic corps operates like special operations teams. They identify key influencers. They map social networks. They understand cultural nuances. Their negotiations are intelligence-driven and precision-targeted. The machinery behind this strategy is extensive. Cultural exchange programs, educational partnerships, technology sharing agreements. Each interaction serves multiple purposes. The obvious benefits create goodwill. The underlying data collection informs strategy. The dual-purpose approach is characteristically efficient. Their diplomatic methods resemble their combat philosophy. Both prioritize information and psychology over brute force. Both value precise application over overwhelming expenditure. The same mindset operates across different domains. The consistency is notable. The resolution crystallized during our conversation. Humanity isn't competing for territory within the existing galactic order. They're building the next order itself. Their ambition isn't to win the game, it's to design the game everyone else will play. This isn't expansion, it's architectural. They're not claiming pieces on the board, they're creating the board itself. The scale of ambition is staggering when understood properly. Most species think in terms of systems and sectors. Humans think in terms of civilizations and epochs. The smooth transition to diplomatic methodology felt natural. The conversation moved from abstract strategy to concrete mechanisms. She began describing how human diplomats are trained. The curriculum focuses on psychological profiling and cultural analysis. Combat training is secondary to communication skills. Then she smiled slightly. We call it diplomacy. The statement landed with particular weight. She said it like it was the most natural weapon in the universe. The simplest explanation often carries the deepest implications. We call it diplomacy. She said it like it was the most natural weapon in the universe. The statement landed with quiet precision. Her tone suggested this wasn't a metaphorical comparison. Diplomacy wasn't just a practice. It was an operational system. The realization arrived slowly. What other species viewed as soft power, humans treated as primary warfare. Their diplomatic corps operated with military precision. Negotiations weren't discussions. They were engagements. Treaties weren't agreements. They were strategic positioning. Humans build relationships based on calculated mutual benefit. They identify what each species values most. Then they provide it through carefully structured exchanges. The arrangements create interdependence rather than dependence. Both sides gain, but humans gain strategically. Research on power structures confirms this approach. Systems based on voluntary cooperation outlast those based on coercion. Conquered territories require constant military investment. Influenced territories maintain themselves. The resource differential becomes enormous at interstellar scales. Their method involves sharing knowledge and technology selectively. They provide advanced medical technology to species with strong research traditions. They offer agricultural systems to civilizations facing food shortages. Each gift creates networks of gratitude and obligation. The approach builds stable power structures through self-interest. Species become invested in human success because their own prosperity is linked to it. Resistance becomes counterproductive when cooperation brings clear benefits. The system maintains itself through rational calculation, anticipation built toward the insurance policy. Such influence-based systems require backup mechanisms. Voluntary compliance works until someone decides non-compliance is worthwhile. There must be consequences for breaking the patterns. Violence serves as insurance rather than primary method. Military capability exists to enforce the diplomatic framework. It ensures agreements are honored. It protects the cooperative network from disruption, but it remains in reserve unless needed. The resolution clarified human strategic thinking. They don't lead with force because force is expensive. They lead with diplomacy because it's efficient. Force becomes the guarantee that makes diplomacy effective. The combination creates sustainable power. This explains their military development patterns. Humans maintain advanced capabilities but avoid unnecessary conflicts. Their ships patrol trade routes rather than claiming territory. Their soldiers train for precision operations rather than mass warfare. The military supports the diplomatic strategy. The galaxy appears poised at a tipping point where humans could become architects of a new interstellar order. Their approach is too efficient to resist. Other species will cooperate because it benefits them. The arrangements will feel voluntary. The results will seem natural. The unsettling possibility remains that Maya represents a species whose true power lies in reshaping reality from behind the scenes. They don't need to conquer territory. They simply need to understand how territory influences behavior. The difference is profound. What future encounters between humans and the galaxy will actually look like remains the most important question none of us can answer yet. The uncertainty itself is their advantage. We don't know what we're facing because we've never faced anything like it before. The galaxy appears poised at a tipping point where humanity's strategic patience may define a new interstellar order. Their strength lies not in visible dominance but in meticulous influence, reshaping alliances and systems from within. Maya embodies this unsettling truth, a species whose true power operates behind diplomacy, intelligence, and precise psychological insight. What future encounters between humans and the galaxy will look like remains our most pressing, unanswered question. They don't seek to conquer space. They seek to understand it so completely that space aligns with them, silently, irresistibly, and by design.